Hello and welcome to the GCSE Biology tutorial for topic B7 Ecology. This is part 2 and includes organisation of an ecosystem. We'll be looking at food chains, quadrats and belt transects, water cycle and the carbon cycle. Going back to these key words that we've looked at before, remember you need to know what the word producer, herbivore, carnivore means, and the word omnivore is an organism that eats animals and plants. To be honest, we most commonly use carnivore in terms in the exams, but you might see the word omnivore as well. And this word biomass, that's the amount of mass or living material that an organism is made up of. And when an animal eats another animal, it's the biomass that's being transferred. So food chains. Food chains connect together in an ecosystem or a community to show what eats what. And lots of food chains together would form a food web. Now, rather than just seeing the arrows as what eats what in a food chain, think of it how energy is transferred. Remember, food chains always start with a plant called a producer because plants produce their own energy inside them, produce their own food inside them from the energy from the sun. And then the producers, the plants, make glucose in photosynthesis. And that's what makes up the living material. Then when something eats that living material, the biomass is passed on, the energy is passed on through one organism to another along the food chain. You also need to know about predators and prey. So a predator hunts and kills a prey. For example, a lion and a zebra. In a stable community, you need to know that a predator-prey cycle looks like this. So here the example is a fly and a frog. So what's happening in the cycle? If we start at the beginning, if the population of the prey increases, so the number of flies increases, then so will the number of predators, the number of frogs. Now, not straight away, you can see it's a little bit out of sync, and that's because it takes time for them to respond. Because there's so many flies, there's going to then be an increase in the number of frogs because they've got more to eat. However, as they start to then increase, the number of prey will start to go down. There's going to be then less flies because they're all being eaten. And this then means the number of predators will start to go down. And this will continue in a cycle pattern. So then the population of prey will start to go up again, and then the prey will go down again, and the predators are alongside this. Now this works if the number of prey is always going to be higher than the number of predators. If there was just less flies than there are frogs, then the frogs would eat them all and there'd be no prey left. So this cycle works if you look at the graph here on the left, looking at the size of those things as well. Okay, there's two practicals you need to know for this topic, which is how to use a quadrat and how to use a belt transect. And a belt transect uses a quadrat as well. And this is to look at the distribution of an organism, so to look at how organisms are spread out in certain areas. It'd be impossible to count every single living thing in an area, so this is a way to study them. A quadrat is used to study smaller organisms, and from its name quad, 4, it's normally a square frame, most often 1 metre squared. If you wanted to count the number of organisms in a certain area, you would throw the quadrat at random in a place in that area and count just the organisms in that quadrat. And then you'd repeat it to get a mean number. Now you can either multiply the mean by the total area to get an estimation of how much would be in that area, and you can also use it to estimate the percentage cover, so how much of the area is being covered, rather than counting absolutely everything in the area. Another way to use quadrats is as a belt transect. So what you would do here is you'd actually mark out a line with a tape measure and you'd place the quadrat, not at random this time, but at regular intervals along the way. And then in the quadrat you would count the number of population of a particular organism, and then you'd look at, for example, how it would change. So you're seeing maybe the further you go from the light, the population of the plants has increased, for example, or decreased, for example. So you're looking at how the population changes, and that might be linked to an abiotic factor. You also need to know about the carbon cycle. So carbon, or carbon dioxide, is in the environment and constantly being cycled. And how does that go from one thing to another? Well, one of the ways it does this is through respiration. So when anything that's living that respires, so whether it be animals or plants or even microbes that feed off dead waste, when they respire, they release carbon dioxide into the air. Another thing that releases carbon dioxide into the air is combustion of fossil fuels and, again, respiration of bacteria, so decomposition. Now, if all these things are releasing carbon dioxide into the air, what's taking it back is the plants, and that's during photosynthesis. So they take in carbon dioxide. And then, of course, animals eat plants, and the carbon gets passed on into the animals, and the animals breathe, and the carbon dioxide comes out. So the carbon is constantly being cycled in the atmosphere. Now, normally that should create a stable amount of carbon, but we'll look at this later on. The amount of carbon dioxide in the environment is increasing because of burning more fossil fuels and because of deforestation. We'll look at that later. The water cycle is similar in the way that water is constantly cycled in the environment. Water will start at the bottom. Water evaporates from the ocean up into the air, and also plants lose water via transpiration. That word is from the plant topic. As the water vapour warms, it rises and it cools down to form clouds. And then clouds release rain or precipitation, or it can be hail or snow, but in most cases rain. And that goes onto the land, and it either runs off into the oceans again or through the soil, so it percolates through the soil eventually, and then down into the water table, and then back into the oceans. And the cycle starts again. So here's a 6-mark question on this topic. If you pause the tutorial and give yourself 10 minutes to describe how carbon dioxide is recycled constantly in the air. Okay, so this question links to the carbon cycle. So you need to talk about the things that allow carbon dioxide to go into the air and those that absorb it. So plants, first of all, take in carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. Plants also respire and release carbon dioxide, and then animals eat the plants and the carbon's passed on. And animals respire and release carbon dioxide. Now, when anything dies, it gets broken down and decomposed by bacteria. And these bacteria, or the decomposers, they have to respire, so they also release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Dead animals and plants over millions of years can form fossil fuels. When we burn fossil fuels, we release carbon dioxide, and that also releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. There's some extra things here as well. Volcanoes release a small amount of carbon dioxide as well. And you could talk about the fact that the amount of carbon dioxide is actually increasing due to human impact, which we'll look at in another tutorial. In summary, we've looked at food chains, quadrats and transects, carbon cycle and water cycle. Thank you.